Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jeremy Leffler. I work in the policy office at the National Science Foundation. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to the NSF Virtual Grants Conference. Before we begin, we do want to take a quick poll to find out a little bit more about you. If you're using Zoom from a desktop browser, you may not be able to access the poll. For best results, we suggest that you use and view the presentation from the Zoom application. So we have arranged for this entire grants conference to take place online this year with over 2 weeks worth of webinars for the research community, with having 2 sessions per day. The content for our webinar series is similar to what it would be for an in-person grants conference. All of these sessions have been pre-recorded. However, we will be taking live Q&A. You can submit questions using the Q&A function in Zoom. We are encouraging attendees to upvote questions. So to upvote a question, you go to the Q&A function, you click on the thumbs up button, and this will bring the most popular questions to the top of the Q&A window. At the end of the presentation, we'll spend some time answering your questions. Please keep in mind that we do have a rather large audience for this session, so it's possible that we may not be able to answer all of your questions. This session is being recorded, and it will be made available on our website at nsfpolicyoutreach.com in the coming weeks. And we'll be sure to send you an email note to let you know that the sessions have been posted. If you have or experience any technical difficulties during this presentation, please use the Q&A and someone will assist you. I want to thank you for participating in our poll. We're happy and excited that you can join us, as this marks our first ever virtual grants conference. And we've been doing these conferences for a long time at NSF. They began small as one-day events with a handful of program staff. Over the years, they grew to 2 full days and 25 to 30 staff, and now a virtual event. We do hope that you'll enjoy this session and all of the sessions that you choose to attend. I'm now pleased to present this session, which will cover the work and programs of the NSF Office of International Science and Engineering. This session will be covered by Emig of that same office.
Good afternoon. My name is Emig from the NSF Office of International Science and Engineering. Thank you for joining today for this session on international research and opportunities and resources at NSF. The NSF Office of International Science and Engineering is the office I belong to, and our work is important and something we're happy you want to know about, in part because scientific research has always been international, but it is increasingly so today. And international collaboration is supported across NSF, but we also, in my office, offer targeted funding opportunities. Within NSF, OISE facilitates international engagement for NSF colleagues and also the U.S. research community in a variety of ways. In the internal NSF context, we are the sort of diplomatic desk officers of NSF, and we work closely with the Department of State to make sure that NSF's operations and our funding activity are consistent with U.S. foreign policy. We coordinate with other federal agencies in international policy to make sure policy decisions the government takes keeps NSF's interests and the interest of the U.S. research community in mind. And of course, the other thing we do, as I indicated before, is offer targeted funding. And we'll come to those in the second half of the presentation. Now, the global R&D landscape is increasingly diverse. This particular chart shows science and engineers per million people and R&D as a percentage of GDP. When you look at this graph, you see that the United States is the largest player in the global R&D landscape, but China is emerging has emerged as a strong player. But there are also strong players in a variety of countries and regions around the world. Looking globally, you can see this shows the distribution of global R&D investment across regions around the world. North America accounts for 27.3% of all global R&D investment. What that means then is that 72.7% of investment takes place outside of the US. That's not to say that our 27.3% in any way makes us a weak player. It simply means that there are tremendous opportunities for collaboration internationally from working with others. Not only is there a large volume or a large share of global R&D investment that takes place outside of the US, but increasingly that investment is yielding joint publications across a diverse range of fields. And what you see here is the international co-authorship is that it's increasing. The blue bars being international co-authorship in 2000 and the orange bars being in 2016. So in every field presented here, you see a rise in co-authorship. And the other thing, which I don't have a chart, a relatively recent chart to demonstrate, but does hold true, is that an increasing share of high impact site publications are in internationally co-authored papers. So with that in mind, we feel that the work of the Office of International Science and Engineering in promoting international collaboration is more important than ever. At NSF, our priorities for international engagement are to promote the development of a globally engaged workforce, to facilitate international partnerships that advance research, and to provide opportunities for U.S. leadership to shape the global science and engineering agenda. And when we talk about U.S. leadership to shape the agenda, that's not meaning, to exert power in a way that puts other potential partners or players down. It's rather to say that we believe that U.S. science and engineering is strong because of a particular approach we have to supporting basic research, fundamental research. And that approach is one of openness, transparency, and reciprocity. And those values, we believe, are important in the implementation of international engagement as well. So we try to lead on the values that have strengthened U.S. science to date, and we believe will continue to make us strong going forward. Our core values for international engagement are the following. International collaboration should enhance research and education. We look for international partnerships with reciprocal benefit. We are a U.S. basic research funding agency. We're not a capacity building organization, except insofar as we try to build capacity in the U.S. research community. So an NSF grant with an international component is not the place to look for support to build capacity, say, in your collaborators' countries. But we do like to see benefits being reciprocal. We don't like to do extractive science. We hope our international engagement supports networks that link expertise and leverage resources. We can do more science and better science together by not replicating the same investments in dozens of countries around the world, but by taking advantage of the synergies and networking. We always seek opportunities for U.S. student engagement in international research activities. And then, as I mentioned before, we seek a commitment to openness and to data sharing, transparency, and integrity in the execution of research, in the implementation of research. Now, NSF funding for international activities, which is probably what you're most interested in learning about, takes place across NSF. If you dollar for dollar, the largest share of NSF support for international activity takes place within the NSF disciplinary directorates. And it takes place in a number of forms. It might be part of awards through regular research programs. There might be supplements to regular awards, or actually targeted funding opportunities that call out international from the start as a priority. Some examples of funding opportunities for international within NSF are the following. And first, we have some broad categories of funding opportunities and some examples within those. Our sort of most fully integrated type of funding opportunities for international are what we call lead agency opportunities. And these are opportunities where NSF and the counterpart funding agency have a long history of working together. We trust each other, and we trust each other's merit review and decision processes. As a result, the lead agency opportunities open broad opportunities for U.S. and the international partner PIs to submit one proposal together that gets reviewed by a single lead agency in the partnership. So with NSF and the UK Research and Innovation, and NSF and the Binational Science Foundation of Israel have very broad lead agency opportunities where throughout NSF core programs, it's possible for partners to work with their, for NSF PIs to work with their international partners and submit one proposal and thereby avoid problems of double jeopardy in the review process. We are gradually expanding lead agency opportunities, and we have several that are focused. And when I say focused, it means they don't apply broadly across NSF directorates, but they might apply within one or two directorates or divisions. So, for example, the Computer Science Directorate has a new lead agency opportunity with Finland. Taiwan has a lead agency opportunity with the Earth Sciences Division in the Geosciences Directorate. And Germany has there's a lead agency agreement that cuts across a number of chemistry-related fields, whether it's the chemistry division and the CBET division in engineering, et cetera. So that's one type of opportunity. You may see international opportunities called out in Dear Colleague letters. So, for example, early in 2000, the Quantum Leap Working Group at NSF and the Office of International Science and Engineering jointly issued a Dear Colleague letter inviting already funded PIs in quantum science and quantum information science and engineering to request supplements to add an international collaboration to their existing opportunities. There also is a foundation-wide DCL or Dear Colleague letter that invites research collaborations in Europe for any NSF awardee. And again, that would be implemented in the form of a supplement. And then the third kind of funding opportunity we have might be funding opportunities that result from a memorandum of understanding between NSF and a foreign funding agency that would lead to co-review and co-funding of proposals submitted to an NSF program. So, for example, the biological sciences has a program called the Ecology and Evolution of Infectious Diseases. That funding opportunity has sort of call out special opportunities with China, for example, and also, if my memory serves me correctly, with the UK. The Collaborative Research in Computational Neuroscience, which is led by the Computer Science Directorate, has targeted funding opportunities within the CRCNS solicitation with 5 or 6 countries: the UK, France, Germany, Israel, Spain, and Japan. It is, I think, not the UK. But anyway, the solicitation itself calls out those opportunities, and there are quite a number of those around the foundation. And that previous slide that I showed is only a small sample of those opportunities. And now I'd like to talk for most of the rest of the presentation about OISE managed funding opportunities. And there are 4 in particular that I'll call out. One is accelerating research through international network-to-network collaboration. Another is international research experiences for students. Then we have partnerships for international research and education. And then we recently put out a Dear Colleague letter ourselves, inviting proposals on the theme of the future of international research collaboration in the post-COVID era. Okay, so we'll go through each one of those one by one. AccelNet, or Accelerating Research Through International Network-to-Network Collaboration, is a solicitation or a program that began with a funding opportunity 2 years ago. So the revised solicitation, NSF 21-511, just came out on October 9th, and it invites proposals for our 3rd round of funding. AccelNet aims to foster networks of networks, creating links between networks of U.S. researchers and counterpart networks in 1 or more countries outside the U.S. The networks of networks aim to leverage the expertise, data, facilities, and other resources of the combined networks to stimulate critical research advances. And then the other thing that AccelNet works to do is to engage students and early career researchers in those networks of networks so that they can both contribute and benefit from those research advances through the team effort. AccelNet supports catalytic and full-scale implementation projects, and it focuses on topic areas that have been identified by NSF or your research community as a grand challenge in the community. So these might be the NSF 10 big ideas, or they might be emerging NSF research priorities, or priorities that have emerged within your research community. And that's what AccelNet aims to focus on. AccelNet is a program with a deadline, and the deadline for the next competition is January 4th, 2021. Our next program is International Research Experiences for Students, or IRES. IRES is a long-standing program that does have also an updated solicitation this year, and it's NSF 20-598. IRES aims to develop the globally engaged STEM workforce, and it does it by this year offering 2 tracks of funding opportunities opportunities. Track 1 is IRES sites. IRES sites are faculty-led cohorts of undergraduates and/or graduate students who go abroad to conduct research, for research experiences that typically last, like on average, about 6 weeks, but they may be 4 weeks in cases of exceptionally short experiences, or unusually long experiences might be 10 or 12 weeks, but probably 6 to 8 weeks is the average. The students are mentored by researchers in the partner lab overseas while they're abroad. And typically we fund 30 to 35 of these IRES sites each year. And the deadline is November 12th, 2020. IRES Track 2 invites proposals for advanced studies institutes. These are their seminar-style training opportunities for graduate students. The concept of the advanced studies institutes comes out of the old NATO advanced studies institutes. They're sometimes called summer schools. Typically, an IRES Track 2 proposal might request funding for one advanced studies institute or a series of ASIs. The maximum budget is $400,000, but one advanced studies institute typically costs somewhere around $125,000 to $150,000. So you can see that the max budget does allow for conceptualization of a series of 2 or 3 ASIs. I should say that that IRES sites are $300,000, and they're 3-year awards. Advanced Studies Institutes are 3 or 4-year awards. The deadline for Track 2, the Advanced Studies Institute, is November 9th, so not long after you'll hear this presentation. Our third OISE-led program is our flagship research and education program, and it's called PIRE, Partnerships for International Research and Education. I say the slide says it's our flagship research program because it's our one program that where a substantial portion of the budget is expected to actually fund research in addition to funding education opportunities. PIRE supports frontier research that can't be done at or as close to the frontier without leveraging the complementary expertise of U.S. and international teams. And then PIRE awards are expected to provide extensive overseas research opportunities for U.S. students and early career researchers. We have active awards across all NSF disciplines in PIRE, as we do with ExcelNet and IRES. PIRE has been paused for several years now, but we expect to issue a new solicitation in 2021 with the aim of making awards in the U.S. government 2022 fiscal year. Okay, so look for that. And then our final OISE-led funding opportunity is a Dear Colleague letter on the future of international research collaboration in the post-COVID era. This stems from, of course, the recognition that international collaborations have been as impacted, if not more so, than all the rest of science as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. When NSF issued our foundation-wide Dear Colleague letter, we got a huge response, but not a whole lot of proposals exclusively focusing on international. And we ourselves in the international office have come with the passage of time to have a real interest in seeing what research shows about how COVID has impacted research and what some of the creative solutions to, say, travel limitations and that sort of thing, what creative solutions have emerged and how we might integrate them into planning for international collaborations in the future. So this DCL then invites rapid or eager proposals under two types: research to clarify the lessons of COVID for international collaboration, like looking at the scale and scope of COVID, sliced in any of a number of different, very potentially interesting ways. And type two would support research to actually strengthen international collaboration in the future. These are rapid and eager proposals. So their rapids are up to $200,000, eagers up to $300,000. And each mechanism requires that you consult the program officer in advance and receive approval to submit. Now, this DCL is open until March 31st, 2021, or until our funds are fully obligated. Okay. Now, then finally, as I near a conclusion to the presentation, I'd like to focus on some final guidance for NSF proposal submissions that include international collaborations. First and foremost, any proposal submitted to NSF, whether with international collaboration or not, is reviewed by the same intellectual merit and broader impacts criteria. So it's critically important that your proposal demonstrate how the international collaboration enhances your proposed research, and also how it might enhance the proposed education component of the proposal. So that gets to the heart of showing how your intellectual merit and broader impacts are strengthened in a unique way by adding the international collaboration element. I mentioned that we want to see U.S. students and junior researchers involved. This is not written in stone as part of NSF policies and procedures, but we in the Office of International Science and Engineering believe that building strong international collaborations means building them in a way where they move beyond the senior researcher and incorporate the next generation so that we might gain benefit from the collaboration for an extended period of time. Next, pay attention to diversity and pay attention to it in a way that gives it more than lip service. OISE cares as much about broadening participation in science and engineering as anybody in the foundation, and often international collaborations offer a great way for underrepresented minority students, for example, or colleagues at the PI co-PI level to spread their wings or take what they already know and share it beyond their existing lab. So pay attention to broadening participation, and we're increasingly working within our solicitations to put some resources in there. From, for example, we funded a workshop recently on broadening participation in science and engineering through international collaboration, and lessons of experience with both engaging broad populations of students in research and then sharing those lessons and the opportunities of international collaboration broadly to help the U.S. engage the missing millions in the science enterprise. Another bit of guidance, of course, is that you should include the bio sketch of your key collaborators. Your key collaborators are typically unfunded collaborators, but we want their bio sketch, and it should be included in their proposal in the supplementary document section of the proposal. Include a letter or letters of commitment from your collaborator or collaborators. Unless the solicitation says otherwise, you do have to follow the PAP guide requirement for letters of commitment, and it's a very short, pithy phrase about being essentially being on board with a collaboration. Often NSF International Office solicitations will have some language asking for letters of commitment that put a bit more than just the limited PAP guide language. So pay attention to the solicitation on that. This next point is important. NSF typically only funds the U.S. side of the collaboration. Our arrogance is the opportunity to work with you. It should be enough incentive for the other side to bring its own money to the table. Now, there are circumstances that NSF policies allow that a request for funding for the non-U.S. side, but the PAP guide also has some specific requirements that have to be met in that case as well. But support for the foreign side is rare at NSF. So, and OISE itself, because we're trying to internationalize the U.S. science and engineering community rather than fund the international research community, we tend to be stricter than perhaps your disciplinary directorate might be. But that's something to talk with your disciplinary program officer about. And then the two final bullet points are probably the most important. Read the solicitation and follow solicitation specific guidance. Whatever I say here is trumped by what's in the solicitation. So for example, if this slide says include the bio sketch of key collaborators, but if you're applying for career, I think career doesn't allow you to have a whole bunch of different bio sketches, even if you have an international collaborator. So you need to read the solicitation and let what's in the solicitation trump what's in these slides. And then finally, the staff of the Office of International Science and Engineering is available for questions you might have about international. In OISE, our portfolios are country specific. Most of us have disciplinary specializations as well, but we are the sort of, as I said at the beginning, desk officers for countries. So if you have any questions about policy constraints or potential funding opportunities, or overseas and things like that, don't hesitate to reach out to an OISE country program officer, and you can find us at this link here. Okay, and that's the end of the presentation. Once again, my name's Ann Emig. My email address is here. I invite you to ask questions now during the live session, or to email your questions to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ann. And it looks like we've received a few questions, and Ann has been able to answer a number of them in the Q&A. So hopefully you can see the answers to those questions. And I think what we'll do is we'll just start going through some of these questions. And what I'd like to do is, it may not be specific to your very specific question, but we'll try and make it a little bit more broad of a question that can really apply to everybody who's listening, or to most people who are listening. And the first question that I'm going to try and glean some of the intent of the question was asking about dear colleague letters for collaboration in Europe. And really, I guess the question is asking how does OISE use dear colleague letters? Are they pointing to specific funding opportunities, letting people know about specific funding opportunities, or are they really to be used to call attention to supplementary funding for existing awards?
Thank you for that question. In general, we may use dear colleague letters for multiple purposes, but in the case of the European Research Council opportunities, That Dear Colleague letter is designed to make the community aware of a supplemental funding opportunity. So the opportunity is open only to researchers who have currently active NSF awards. It is not a place to submit a brand new proposal. But if you have NSF funding, that opportunity does create an avenue to get supplemental funding to work with a selection of funded European researchers. So do take a look at that. There may be other DCLs that are specifically designed to add or call attention to an opportunity for international collaboration for existing awardees. For example, in 2020, the OISE and the NSF programs that offer funding opportunities for quantum-related research. We jointly issued a Dear Colleague letter calling out opportunities for international collaboration in quantum. We highlighted 7 or 8 priority countries, but opened the collaboration to countries that weren't called out as well. So it was not exclusive. Occasionally, DCLs are designed to make the community aware of new opportunities, such as new lead agency opportunities and things like that. So they have a broad variety of purposes, but in the specific case of the DCL for Europe, it's a supplement.
Thank you. We had some questions asking about specific countries, and you answered some of these, but I wanted to go back to, in your presentation, you talked about agreements that NSF makes and has MOUs with foreign agencies and governments. And how would one, as a researcher, identify those types of opportunities in the different countries where we have agreements?
A good question. So I would say 2 things. First of all, you do not need NSF to issue a country-specific funding opportunity in order for you as a researcher to submit a proposal to NSF that involves international collaboration. In principle, any proposal to any program at NSF may include an element of international collaboration. And in particular, it may be well reviewed and be funded if you make a strong case for how the international collaboration strengthens the intellectual merit and broader impacts of the proposal. But if you want to know about opportunities with a specific country, one easy way would be to go into the NSF website and just search by the country, but a perhaps more direct route where you might get additional helpful information would be to go to the link for the OISE country program officer and email or call that program officer and ask for their advice. Give them some sense of what it is you want to do and ask if there are any programs that they can point you to that would specifically facilitate opportunities with that country. Okay.
Great. Can you clarify how international supplements for an REU site or supplement, how that would work?
So I probably for an REU supplement, the best thing to do would be to reach out to the REU program director. But I'll tell you that my understanding is, so supplement proposals or proposals for supplemental opportunities are always the responsibility of the cognizant program officer on the award. So if you have an award for an REU that's from the chemistry division, for example, in math and physical sciences, then you would talk to the chemistry division REU program director about
the supplemental opportunity that you're interested in. And chemistry may have specific guidance that supplements, REU supplements come in at a specific time or something along those lines. But OISE does not manage supplements to REUs. Those are handled through the REU specific program. Okay.
Great. And can you talk a little bit about the review process and co-review when you're submitting to a core program in bio, for instance, or engineering? How does that work? How does OISE get involved in co-review?
Okay, so co-review is so we have types of agreements with international partners, particularly lead agency opportunities, where where NSF and the international partner jointly review proposals, where there may be international reviewers included on a panel, or there may be NSF identified reviewers who are participating in a review process managed by an international partner. Let's say if the lead agency is one of the UK funding agencies or something like that. But when there is a proposal to NSF that has an international element to it, then the cognizant program officer in the research directorate may invite the OISE program director to sit in on the review panel and potentially to recommend an ad hoc reviewer or two who would have knowledge of that research area and also have some specific experience working internationally. And OISE might, for our proposals, say for IRES or ExcelNet, we might have proposals that are in an area that where we think the research directorate would be interested in sitting in on that review, or they might be able to offer suggestions for ad hoc reviewers. So as an internal NSF operation, we may talk to each other and say, hey, we've got this proposal that you might be interested in. Would you like to sit in on the panel and offer your comments?
Okay, there's a question about international collaboration in a quote unquote regular research proposal. What can be included in the budget for that?
So in principle, NSF funds the US side of an international collaboration. And that means we fund everything related to the U.S. side participating in the international collaboration. It is fair game to include your airfare and your per diem. In OISE funded student programs, we always say, and even when you're sending students internationally in a core program proposal, we say, don't just get the student there, but make sure you pay them the equivalent of an REU stipend. I think it's about $500 a week or something like that. So the students can eat and they can pay for their books when they get back to school in the US over the summer, if they choose to save their money rather than spending it enjoying their time overseas, right? Typically, we do not pay salary or honoraria for researchers overseas, but we pay for specific costs relating to you being overseas. So if there are research supplies, or if there's transportation to a field site, if there's a field guide, whose services have to be enlisted, those kind of things are legitimate. Now, when I say we don't fund salary and honoraria for international researchers, we in OISE do not. The NSF policy does not explicitly forbid it, but it's exceedingly rare. So it happens in less than 1%, probably in rough estimate numbers, less than 1%, probably about 0.5% of all NSF awards involve some sort of funding for an international partner. NSF policy, Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, PAP Guide, Chapter 1, I think it's 1E6, includes language about special requirements if you feel compelled to request funding for a foreign counterpart through a subaward or consultancy or other sort of arrangement. And you have to justify why this service cannot be provided by researchers in the US and things like that. So this is extremely rare. It's not forbidden, but particularly when you're working with a developed country. I do a lot of work with Japan. If you're working with OECD member countries, those countries tend to have well-developed science funding apparatuses, and they generally but again, I won't say always, but they generally have access to funds through their national systems that would facilitate collaboration. So our thinking is the more funds we pay to researchers overseas, the less funds are available to fund you and your students in the US research community. So we try to develop a balanced approach, but in principle, salaries and honoraria for your collaborators overseas are not prioritized.
So, and thanks, Anne. I've also just dropped into the chat the link to the PAP guide on foreign organizations. So you have that reference there. A question specific to the PIRE solicitation they're asking, is an assistant professor considered an early career researcher?
So NSF considers within 6 years of your PhD to be early career, and generally assistant professors fall in that category.
Okay.
And PIRE has never had any limitations on what level you need to be to submit a proposal. PIRE has historically limited to submission to PhD granting institutions as the lead institution. But the various characteristics of the upcoming PIRE solicitation have not been announced. And, you can take what you will from what's been done historically. I can't promise there won't be tweaks, but we won't announce those until the solicitation hits the street.
Sure. A question about conferences and with a large international component.
Yeah.
If someone is looking to hold a conference with a large international component, what would be the best way, or is there a specific opportunity or the best mechanism to do that? And what are the costs that would be covered?
So there is no specific funding opportunity for conferences. When it comes to professional society meetings, or even more narrowly defined professional conferences, the funding unit is most typically the cognizant division or directorate. Okay, and how much flexibility they offer you in funding international partners would be up to them. It really varies. I'm aware of, directorates that fund, say, U.S. student participation in international professional meetings. There are some that would allow a small number of international, say, students or speakers from abroad to be funded under their grant, but there's no universal approach to that, I would say.
Okay, there's a longer question here about you talked about U.S. funds going to the U.S. side of projects, and this person understands that and says some countries may not have robust research funding available on their end, and to do cross-cultural research, it makes sense to have data collected by local researchers and trainees. It would cost more and limit the amount of data collected to have U.S. researchers and trainees travel and do all the data collection themselves, as opposed to doing a few visits. Is this something that kind of fits within the exception you're talking about?
So again, it is something that is legitimately proposed, and may be regarded as an essential cost in certain programs in the research directorates in particular. There may be cases where OISE would consider in our programs a small amount of funding, but what you're talking about sounds like it could very well be a situation where you're thinking of a proposal to, say, a core program in your research directorate. And if you have any concerns about whether it would be appropriate or not, the best thing to do would be to talk with the cognizant program officer there. And I apologize for the dog in the back.
Just another couple of questions. We're asking about, can international projects for high school STEM girls be submitted as an IRES proposal?
So IRES typically is trying to build the pipeline for U.S. students. If the submitting institution can make, so I believe the language in IRES says research and research-related professional development opportunities for U.S. students. It's typically undergrads or graduate students, but I would say I don't see any reason it could not be at least a part of an IRES. You might want to talk with the cognizant program director on IRES. It's not something that happens often. I can tell you that I'm not aware of it ever even receiving proposals of that sort, but I have never managed the IRES program where I've seen all the proposals for several years at a time. So I suggest you talk with a cognizant program officer who is Cleanthus Saris, and KPSARRIS. And I have to say his deadline was just the 12th of November. So he's frantically trying to put together panels now. And the next deadline isn't until September. So you might want to just give him a couple of weeks before you send a question.
Another question, if a U.S. researcher wants to use, for example, analytical facilities in a foreign country, can they include the cost of using the instrument in the budget, knowing this money will go to the foreign organization?
Yes, that typically, if there are mandatory user fees, yes, then those are typically considered part of the essential costs of doing business.
So we have a few questions here. They're very specific questions, and I'm going to encourage you to send your questions directly to Anne, because these are very specific to some specific funding opportunities and programs. I do want to thank all of you for participating today, and I want to thank Anne for taking the time to present and to answer all of your questions. And I hope that you will be able to attend some of the other sessions that we have planned tomorrow and then the week of November 30th. Again, thank you all for coming, and be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.